Good day my disciples, Father Andrew here. Today I'm going to be telling you how I go about surviving the winter and how I deal with colds when I catch them. Getting straight into it with some overall general advice. Firstly, you want to stay warm and dry in the colder months. If your skin or clothes gets wet, that's a very easy way for the body to lose heat. Secondly, in extreme cold, wrapping up with layers is a good idea. The more extreme the temperature drop, the more layers you should put on. And thirdly, either avoid going out in the cold when possible or minimize your time out there by planning what you're going to do before you go out. And now with those 3 bits of overall general advice set down, I want to expand on the clothing aspect. That being my advice for winter clothing in the worst conditions. Firstly, you want minimal exposed skin. Everything should be covered, including your eyes if you have snow goggles, but if you don't have anything like that, then they should be the only thing that's exposed at most. Secondly, you're going to want to wear gloves and leather work boots. Having thick leather work boots minimizes the ability for water to seep in and drain body heat, especially if you have to trudge through things like snow and ice. And gloves allow you to stop unnecessarily losing heat through your hands, while also allowing you to pick up cold objects with minimal heat loss. Thirdly, use layers to increase thermal insulation. Wear multiple socks and tracksuit bottoms in layers, for example. Fourthly, no skin-tight clothing because it's terrible insulation. You want baggy, loose clothing to break up incoming wind instead. And fifthly, you're going to need a hat or scarf or hoodie of some kind to keep the wind off your neck and head. A combination of all 3 works best, but a specific clothing item I greatly recommend are sheepwool insulated pilot jackets. A sheepwool jacket provides amazing insulation, and from my personal experience they are exceedingly good at keeping you warm, albeit you may find moving in them to be a tad difficult. I personally find the thick sleeves make it extremely hard for me to sit at the computer and type up scripts like the one I'm reading now, and the jackets themselves are quite heavy. But outside of that, I do recommend them. Anyway, moving on from that, another thing I'm going to give advice on is keeping your body temperature up. A good way to do this is to drink warm fluids throughout the day. My personal recommendations are coffee or honey and lemon. Coffee especially because it stimulates your metabolism, which helps the body generate heat, keeping you warmer for longer. Moving around also generates body heat, so that's another good thing to keep in mind. But if you want to keep your body heat, do not drink alcohol. It is a complete myth that alcohol warms you up. If anything, it does the complete opposite, because when you drink alcohol, it dilates the blood vessels in your skin, pulling blood to your skin, making you feel warmer. Which, if you're in the cold, is going to result in you losing body heat faster, which makes it more likely that you're going to freeze. And with that, that's how to keep your body temperature up. Now we're going to be talking about how you stay warm indoors. Firstly, a way to heat up indoors is fireplaces. They are very great at making heat, albeit they can be costly to run for some, and the heat is usually exclusive to the one room that they're in, unless you have a proper heat distribution system set up throughout the house. And if someone watching this is planning to get a fireplace installed, I recommend you get some kind of way to distribute heat throughout the rest of the building. That way you don't have to rely on central heating, which is the next thing I want to talk about. Secondly, the aforementioned central heating. Having one of these systems in your house is a good way of heating it, but unfortunately due to increasing energy costs for Europeans at the time of writing the script for this video, using central heating is pretty much not an option if you're European. Why? Because of the government, that's why. But anyway, thirdly, electric blankets. I personally advise investing in electric blankets as they are extremely cheap to run. Like, the one I have for my bedroom costs a mere 3 pence per hour to run, and it's incredibly warm. I use it for its intended purpose of pre-warming my bed before I peace out for the night so I'm not freezing to death. But I also use it to warm up some clean clothing, so when I'm done taking a bath or a shower, I can just dry off, go into my room, put them on, and they're nice and warm. And if you're super cold, you can just wrap the electric blanket right around you. So yeah, I very much recommend getting one. Next up on the list, fourthly, we have heat pumps. I'm gonna be straight with you, I do not recommend these things whatsoever. They are exceedingly costly to purchase and install. They lose efficiency in colder weather, which kinda just goes against the fundamental point of having one in the first place. And if you want one that's designed for dealing with lower temperatures, they're gonna be more expensive. They rely entirely on electricity. They have a tendency to be a lot noisier, making a noticeable hum or buzzing sound during operation. And they require refrigerant as well, which on its own also costs a good bit of money. And the maintenance costs of an air pump are greater than that of a regular boilers. Just to put this into perspective, while the average gas boilers like maintenance cost is £100 British, convert that into whatever currency is applicable to you, an air pump on average ranges from 150 to 300 yearly. Keep in mind, both of these costs are for yearly maintenance. So that air pump is costing you an extra 50% to up to 3 times the amount of money per year in just maintenance alone. Oh, and to truly get it across just how much these things suck, the ground source heat pump that suffers from the least problems has a lot of geological dependency, as in there's a lot of places you just straight up can't set one up because they extract heat from the ground and use that to heat up buildings. Some places on Earth straight up just are too cold in the geological aspect for these things to work. So they don't even have the same applicable range as a boiler does. So really, I'm just going to summarize it down into the simplest terms possible. They cost too much, they're too inefficient, and they're just overall not worth bothering with. But anyway, that's enough rants about how much I dislike heat pumps. Now to move on to the next thing. That not being another type of heating method, instead I'm going to give you a bit of advice on maintenance to do with heating. That maintenance advice being, get your boiler systems checked every year, and if you have radiators, get them checked every year as well, especially before it starts to get cold. You should also generally bleed your radiators every year when it begins to get cold, as to keep the heating system as efficient as it can be. Lastly, another bit of advice I want to give for staying warm indoors is the most obvious, and that is shutting your doors and windows to minimize heat loss. And if necessary, either put a towel across the gap under the door to stop the draft getting in, or buy a draft excluder. And with that section of the video done, that is my advice on how to deal with the cold weather. Now we're going to move on to the next part of the video, and that is dealing with the inevitable cold sickness that comes with it. And in regards to that, the first thing I need to say is, being out in cold weather does not cause a cold infection. This is a myth. Being out in the cold does not spontaneously afflict you with a respiratory virus. And yes, I know, while some people may go out into cold weather, then come back in and start to show symptoms of what looks like a cold, that is not the virus at work. That is the body responding to a rapid change in temperature. But I will say, drops in temperature can compromise the body's immune system, making it easier for an infection to get in. But it's not the cold on its own that gives you it, it's being around someone who's infected that gives you it. It's just being cold makes it easier for you to catch it. But anyway, when it comes to dealing with the inevitable cold sickness of the season, the first thing we're going to go over is prevention. The way I go about this is I typically will avoid people I know to be infected to the best of my ability, or if it's necessary for me to be around them, I will not stand directly in front of them to avoid the majority of infection particles that we spraying out of their mouth every time they cough and sneeze. Along with generally keeping topped up on vitamin C rich foods, or alternatively taking vitamin C supplements once a day, and generally keeping my immune system ready, along with keeping my internal body temperature up, all of which makes it harder for the cold to get a foothold in the body. But when it comes to actually catching a cold and how I deal with it, that is the next part I will now be elaborating on. Starting at the very beginning, upon noticing the first signs of a cold, I'll begin to take vitamin C if I'm not already, and increase my warm fluid intake while wearing extra clothing to keep warm, as to give my body the best fighting chances in the early stages. Even going to bed early, giving my body enough rest to battle the infection. I'll combo this with changing my sleeping position as symptoms begin to progress, positioning myself in a way where snot and mucus flows to the front of the face instead of back down the throat and onto the chest, which could start a chest infection, dragging out the sickness. This being a form of postural drainage position, which has many different variants and positions, and I advise that if you're going to use it, pick one that is best for you. For me, this is often being face down and relatively flat in a position where I have adequate neck and spinal support, as long-term front sleeping can cause spinal issues, that being mainly stiff back and spinal pain. Now drink more warm fluid as it progresses, mainly honey and lemon to battle the accumulating gunk, and coffee to maintain energy and combat the fatigue as it sets in. When my nose starts to show the classic symptom of getting stuffy and runny, I resist sniffing and instead I'll blow it all out gently and regularly so infected fluid isn't able to accumulate and then run down the back of the throat. I also combo this with rubbing the sinuses in a way where it forces them to drain, which, on a related note, a bit of a side rant here, I really don't like how our sinus system is set up. Like the top sinuses around your eyebrows, the frontal sinuses, they drain into the maxillary sinuses, which are above your back top molars, but also partially out into the nose. But most of that drainage is going into the maxillary sinus. The aforementioned maxillary sinus has no lower drainage area, like it has no outlet. Instead, it necessitates that you have to lay on your side and the gunk go upwards to drain the sinus out, which is extremely inefficient for draining mucus, and risks the infected fluid making its way back up into the frontal sinuses. But yeah, I think you can understand why I don't like this system. Anyway, that's the end of that rant, back to the main topic. As the infection continues to progress and my nose starts to get blocked up, the nasal lining becoming inflamed meaning the sinuses can't be drained, I'll resolve this in one of a few ways. The first one is forcing myself to sneeze, which opens up the sinus and allows fluid to drain. The second is massaging the sinuses to try and convince them to open. And the third is having a nice relaxing hot bath or shower, the heat making the sinuses open, and the steam being inhaled moisturizing the inside of the nose and the mucus that's built up inside, allowing it to easily exit the body. The third method being my personal recommendation, but it also allows you to bring up gunk off your chest if you have a chest infection. Which is fittingly enough the next thing I need to mention. If the condition does progress to a chest infection, I will do exactly that, and in combination I use soothing drinks to combat the throat issues that come alongside it, along with increasing my protein intake through eating chicken. All of these tips stacked together, eating the extra protein, the warm fluids, the steam, staying warm, the extra layer of clothing, the early rest, the vitamin C, the caffeine from coffee, the honey and lemon to soothe your throat, getting all the infected gunk out of your body. All of that works together to combat the infection incredibly well. And also in addendum to that, if it progresses to a chest infection, I adjust my sleep position to one where the infected mucus is brought up and out of the lungs naturally. But yeah, from my experience, all of these combined efforts make a cold, for me at least, last at most just under a week, often 5 to 6 days at the absolute most, which is noticeably shorter than the average cold. And with that brings me to the end of my script, but before I end the video, I just want to say, I genuinely hope all the advice I gave you today helps you out, especially with like the colder seasons and stuff. I'm also aware that in the southern hemisphere, it's apparently summer over there. I think seasons are completely flipped in the southern hemisphere, but I'm not sure. At least that's what I've been told is the case, but I'm not entirely sure. I'd have to look into that. Anyway, stay safe out there, stay warm, see you around, goodbye.